Okay, today is Wednesday, May the 11th, 2022, and it is 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. And welcome to the open house and week one of constitutional law. My name is Richard Wright, and I will be your instructor or professor for the next 5.5 weeks, all the way up until I believe it's the 16th or 17th of June. And that goes pretty fast. I just completed teaching the same course in term one yesterday. So I will be taking the time today to go over the expectations that I hope that you get. Most of my students in the class that I taught last time did exceptionally well. But one of the key things is you need to do the work. And this session that I'm talking about today will pretty much explain to you my expectations and parameters and set the pace for you to be successful in these next 5.5 weeks. Some students didn't check in today, I guess because it's the first day. But it's most interesting is that when I was in school the first day, you had to physically be in class because we didn't have this, and so students should take the time to check in and respond to the email that I sent out, as well as the announcements that are posted. You should always start to look at your classes totally. I will inevitably have some people that come to me and says, "Oh, I didn't know class starts this week. I thought it starts next week." But this is a bachelor program, and term two begins in the middle of the week. That's why we have a lecture on today. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen so you will be able to see what things look like here. And here we are. So you have here at the top the name of the course, and it tells you 5.5 weeks. And across the top, messages. This is where you could see messages. I'll click on it for the first week, and you can see there are two messages where I've sent out to each of you the first of all my welcome announcement, and in that welcome announcement it also welcome email where I talk to you about the program starting today and that the lecture, and then the PowerPoints for week one. Each week I will be sending you PowerPoints. Okay, and then next to it is a grade book, and it tells the written assignments. And the written assignments, it tells you the due date. Now I'm going to bring something to your attention when I start talking about discussions. But your written assignment, Constitutional Foundations for Criminal Justice Procedures, we'll touch on that a little bit. But you'll notice that and your live classroom phrase, which will come out of today's lecture to get your points for attending the lecture or listening to the recording. Don't just listen to the recording, by the way, just to get the key phrase, but also for instructions. Don't get to the point where you make a mistake and say, "Oh, I can read and go through the stuff that the professor goes through." Personally, I wouldn't do that. I would recommend that you listen very carefully because there are some things I remind you of in the lecture. So you notice those are due Sunday. Okay, each of your assignments will be due on Sundays. Your discussion posts are, in this instance, this is your reply post when it says due the 14th. Now, it happens that this week, both your initial posts and reply posts will be due on the 14th. You'll see that when we get to the calendar, because the calendar is really the place where you can really get that. Now, when you see 11:59 p.m., what that's really saying is that it's for the whole day. That's because the next minute after that is 12 o'clock, which means it's the next day. All right. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. All right. And then when we get to discussions, each week you'll have a discussion post. This week it's judicial review, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But scroll down to the course chat, and the course chat, if you click on that, okay, I don't know why it doesn't, this one right here, for some reason or another, does not. Okay, I gotta delete this one. No, I don't know if I'll delete it because it might take the whole thing out. But anyway, here it is down here. If you click on this one under the student lounge and you see this, it will tell you a post that I put in welcoming you, and actually I need to edit that because it says T1. So it's really T2 quarter. Okay, so I saved it. Okay, so now when you look at it, it will say T2, and it tells you something about me. This is my family here, and it tells you a little bit about me, and then it shows you my picture when I graduated with my law degree in 1978. And then there's a mnemonic down here, but take the time to reply to the post and introduce yourself. And then this is a mnemonic that you can take a look at. But if you notice in here, it gives both my email address for the school. Now notice this one doesn't have a 2, but you'll see the one in the course has a 2. Either one you use, it'll still get to me. But the one with the 2 will come into the course. This is my personal email, which I invite students to use if they want. And then this is my cell phone number that you can call or text. We'll talk about that a little later. This number really is of no effect. If you dial this, I'm not on campus because I teach online. But anyway, so that's where you can get that information. All right. Now, okay. Then let's take a look at the calendar. Now, this is the place where you find out when everything is due. I like the month view because it shows you, like today, it shows you that the course begins, and it tells you that your lecture, and if you were to click on this, it will actually open up the day of the 11th, and it tells you course begins. And then if you get down here, lecture, and then this is the link. This is one of the places you'll find the link to get to the lecture, okay, as well. And it tells you this one lasts an hour and a half. And so notice this, that your initial post and reply posts are due the 14th, okay? And then your written assignments are due the 15th. You'll have one written assignment and then your live classroom phrase. Then notice that starting next week, the lectures will not be on Wednesday, but they'll be every Monday, 7 o'clock. And they'll last 1 hour, not 1.5 hours. All right. And then you notice here that your initial post is due starting with week 2 on Tuesdays, and it goes all the way through. All the way through. Let's go to June. Okay, all the way to the 14th. All right, and then the course ends on the 17th. That's the last day of class for this. And then your discussion posts, your reply posts will be due on that day. Your live lecture and your written assignment, 17th. Anything after the 17th will not be accepted. Okay? All right, so that's your calendar. Let's go back to that. Okay, now let's take a look for a minute at the announcements. So we're gonna just share with you. These are things that you can look at yourself. Click on this, the writing process, and it just helps you. This is some helpful information for you. It'll be available to you the whole course. Adversity is the springboard to success is a link to a story about my life. It's just a little piece. It's about an hour and some minutes long, and it's on YouTube. And if you clicked on this, and I'll show you, it will actually take you to the recording itself. And I recorded it in 2020, but it's an hour and 3 minutes long. If you click on that, and you'll hear me talk about when that term adversity is the springboard to success, that you'll learn is my motto and what it's all about. APA guidance and assistance. I put this in here to help you with APA. You should be aware of at this point, because you're bachelor program, how to do this. And so therefore, if you click on this, it leads you to the toolkit, and it explains the basics, how to prevent plagiarism. Now, let me say this to you. There are two things that occur, and then it tells you when you put this in here. At this hour, the library chat can be obtained. Plagiarism can come about by just copying material and not giving credit for it. You'll hear a video in a few minutes about that. But it also comes about when you, as each of you should be aware, you have a Grammarly account. And your Grammarly account from the school is what you should use your email address from the school. And then you use that to run all your papers through, not the discussion posts, but your written assignments that you'll have for each of these weeks. And check the box that says plagiarism. And it will tell you that if your paper contains over 25% of the information that you discovered from your research, you could end up getting what we call a Grammarly hit. And what that means is that first thing I will do is warn you about it, and then remind you to fix it. If I see it again, I will refer it to the school and refer you to tutoring. But you guys should be aware of how this all works, that we use APA. And so it's very important. So also in here, you can see the academic integrity video. If you were to click on it, I'm just showing you that it's here. And we're going to go on to that. So if you were to click that, just show you, this is one place that you can get it. Okay, and there it is right there. But we're going to go over that in just a few minutes. All right, but you can get the academic integrity video, how to set up your papers. Remember, double space. I keep saying this all the time. Double space, cover page, reference. And then it talks about the margins. It talks about the paragraph and the pages number. and then there's a template to help you. I oftentimes tell students double space and they still do single. Don't do that. Typing, APA allows 6 type types, but usually we like 12 point. But if you use 11 or 10, we don't really penalize you. But I will penalize you for the double spacing and the margins and things like that. Okay, so this is just something that will help you with APA. All right. Then with academic integrity video, we'll come back to that in just a minute. I want to show you the welcome announcement, which you see, and it tells you some information that you should be reading. And it also reminds you about the lecture that's taking place right now. And it reminds you that weeks 2 through 6 will be every Monday, 7 to 8 p.m., beginning Monday, the 16th. Okay. So you'll take time to read that. All of this will be still available to you throughout the whole course. All right. And then there's the Justice Studies Guide. If you click on this, it tells you the Justice Studies Guide. And it tells you about videos, and it talks about APA again, Blackboard, tutoring, and the whole 9 yards, dealing with various courses in criminal justice. Okay, this is Dennis Johnson, who is the librarian for criminal justice, and actually you can reach out to him for questions, and then you can do chat hours as well. And then this tells social media about the School of Justice Studies and other things, that resources that are available. And so anyway, that's one thing. Okay, so that's what that is, that link. All right, and so now before we get to the week 1 announcement, let's take a few minutes and look at the academic integrity video. That was what I was talking to you about a few minutes ago. It's going to be closed caption, and I'm going to remove my headset. Okay. And so you're going to hear this, and then you'll see the closed caption, or you can go back later and listen to it yourself. Let me make sure. Okay, it's on now. Okay, it's about 4 minutes long. Listen to this. Pay close attention.
What is academic integrity? Academic integrity is academic life.
I know it's kind of low.
So what is G? Some examples of G. A copy. Purchase papers. Copy. Always ask your professor. Work together with classmates. Now let's talk about plagiarism. Another. How can we set credit? your sources, both in the body of your paper and on your references. Whenever you want to use words, images, cite that person. But how does that work? No. Integrity built while you are a student. Would you turn in the project your management? Not a following academic guidelines. Well, built those skills. Okay, I understand how to check it, but what do you think of academic? Contact the rest.
Okay, all right. So you, this is a video. Again, the volume was kind of low. It's because I switched speakers, but now I'm back on my headset. And if I had my headset on, you wouldn't hear anything said, but it's closed caption. But again, you can go back and you can listen to it on your own. I showed you where you could find it on the Justice Studies Guide, as well as the video itself. And then there's one other place. Okay. Now, let's look at each week. There will be an announcement posted, and it tells you specifically some of the same information that's on the calendar. It talks about the topic. Foundations of Constitutional Law is what the first week is all about. And you're going to read chapter 4 of the textbook, which I sent you the PowerPoints. And those PowerPoints are used to help you prepare your assignments. So we're going to deal with substantive and procedural due process, history of Bill of Rights, judicial review, and then there's a knowledge check for you. Now, I encourage you to do the readings and go over the PowerPoints. And again, the lecture, it tells is taking place this evening, and it gives the link again. Then it tells about the discussion assignment, judicial review, which is the initial post due Saturday, and the reply post is due Saturday for this week, week 1. It'll be different after that. I told you that. Finally, complete the written assignment, Constitutional Foundations for Criminal Justice Procedures. I'll go over that in just a few minutes in more detail to show you how that works and give you the parameters about it. All written assignments are due every Sunday by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. And the requirements are found in the classroom under the Lessons tab, and pay close attention to the rubric and what I say about the rubric. The rubric is so important to getting a good grade. One of the key things that we stress in this school is following instructions and directions. That is so important, so that that's a skill that you'll need when you leave here and work as a professional. Okay. So this in blue, it reminds you of what's taking place right now, and also gives the same link again. And then it says starting strong, finishing strong, and then adversity is a springboard to success. I showed you the video where you can learn about that and what that is all about. So that would be the announcement. Okay, now I want to go over the syllabus. But before I do that, if you click on course books and tools, it will take you to library resources too, where you can find information as well. And it lists the topics that I was talking about. Grammarly, it tells you how to set up your Grammarly account. The Writing Lab, APA, tutoring, and then guides, which you already know how to get to. Transferable skills, which we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. But and here is the justice study, and you'll see something you're familiar with because I showed it to you earlier. That's another way of getting to that as well. Okay. So we have tools in here to help you. All right. Now, in here, the things that you see in color are things that you can use. You can't use the other things that are here. So basically, you have the syllabus. So let's take a look at the syllabus. The syllabus is the agreement that the school has with you for each course. And it provides you with the name, the length of time the course, who your instructor is, and here's my office hours. This is my office hours. It says it in here. You can text me, call me, or email me any hour of the day except the 25th hour. Now, if you pay close attention, it means I'm available all the time. That doesn't mean that I'm an answer all the time. It's just that I will get the message, and in short fashion, I will return. Now, the best method for reaching me is texting or calling. If I'm not available, leave a message. You can email me, but I might not see the email right away. Be aware that the school policy for us responding back to you is 2 days or 48 hours. So let's say if you sent me a message on Monday, I have until the end of the day, Wednesday, to respond, but I don't generally work like that. Emails are slower. And quite honestly, I'm a person who make it quite clear that you lose a lot in terms of trying to email back and forth in terms of getting things done. If you really want to deal with an issue, fix it, texting or calling. That number is 630-660-8480. I gave it to you earlier in that little course chat, but that's the number you'll want to save because it comes to my cell phone, which is sitting right near me. And then my email address, you see it has a number 2 on there, but you could send richard.wright@rasmussen.edu or richard.wright2, and I'll still get it. The 2 will go into the course mail. Now, I don't see the course mail until I go onto my computer, okay? But the other thing I see on my phone, I also see text. I receive the messages on my phone. All right, now, I want you to notice my instructor notes. Please pay attention. This applies throughout the whole course. Reminder, and I have it in all caps, that you are required to conduct research for all papers, which means that the sole source should not be the textbook. So if you cite in the textbook throughout, you're going to lose 2 points, because one of the things that we want to stress to you is we want you to become good researchers, because you're going to have to become that in the future. You also learn by research as well. Citing the textbook is not research. The textbook has already been researched to come up with that source. All written assignments, and I got a spelling in there I got to fix, should be in APA format. That means citations in the body and references at the end. Okay, you'll lose 1 point if you don't provide a cover sheet. I already talked about that. For all written assignments, I'm not talking about discussion posts, but all written assignments, whether it's a PowerPoint form or, as most of them will be, in Word document. Pay close attention to the rubric and the module for each written assignment. I stress that to you every week, and students fail. And then they reach out to me and say, why did I lose so many points? Let me explain to you. When we use the rubric puts you in a category that if something is missing, I won't be able to change that, because if you don't have things that the rubric says you're supposed to have, it puts you in a column and it calculates your points at the same time. So it behooves you to pay attention to what's in the module and the rubric. This is your textbook, which you already have. Okay. It says you should complete all assignments in a weekly fashion. Now, in this course, it says your written assignments, quiz and exams. You don't have quiz or exams in this course. You have written assignments. This is a writing course. Okay. And I already told you when they're due. Now, your discussion posts, you should know this by now, too, as many of you already know me, should not be yes or no. I agree or disagree, good post. No. I want to see your posts contain details, demonstrate that you have some critical thinking included in your writing. All right. And then I already told you about the due dates. All right. So then I introduce you to the APA style that we use and why we use it. And then also, you know about the library resources tab, the resources tab. Now, these are the requirements that you have in this course. Notice again, your readings, your discussion assignments, in which you should do a minimum of one reply post, at least one, but other posts are good. And then I'm going to talk to you about late assignments in a few minutes. Written assignments are going to be involving research in various scenarios. And then you have the live classroom requirement. So here are the points: 750, 30 points for the live classroom lectures, which means you get 5 points for each of giving me the key phrase. 120 for having your discussion posts good content and on time. Written assignments that maximize the points for the assignment, which is generally 100 points. That's 80%. So you don't want to neglect any of this. Now, then I come here. I work on A and B students. Never call me, text me, email me about how to get a C in my class. I refuse to answer that question, because I don't have to help you get a C. You help yourself to get a C. If that's what you want to be a C student. But I don't recommend that, because it could come back to bite you when you're looking for a job. And the key thing is that employers look at those kinds of things, because here's what happens. When you're trying to get a job and you know that the job market is tight, that you want to be someone that they really want to hire, that sometimes it's even asked during interviews, as I've had to answer, why me over anybody else? And if your grades show C's, you're already contradicting yourself. Okay. The key thing is, you're not in this course to get a good grade. You're in this course to learn the material that will enhance your abilities to be able to function in whatever role that you decide to work in criminal justice. That's the key. So having said that, now you got that. If you have any need for accommodations, talk to your dean at your campus about that. All right. Now, transferable skills. These are some skills that employers have determined that they want every graduate or to have. And you'll have a chance to exercise these skills in each of your assignments. Communication. Written and oral communication is especially necessary because of the fact that your documents are going to end up as exhibits in courts, as well as you're going to have to testify in courts and hearings, and you're going to have to communicate with people. And so you're going to have to be able to have good communication. Your grammar should be good. Your it should be your report should be accurate. Inaccurate reports can create problems for even the case. I, as a defense lawyer, have made it known that I have won cases because there were dates that were incorrect in a written report. And it's important that that takes place. Critical thinking, that is, you analyze the material. You don't just copy and paste material, but you also want to support your statements with citations in the body and a reference page. And the key thing with critical thinking is that we want you to analyze the material and take it and put it not only in your own words, but either agree, disagree, or either have information where you want to be able to break it down. Remember, I showed you earlier, you can find more details about critical thinking. I am a natural critical thinker because I went to law school, and as a result of that, I studied what we call the Socratic method. And so I kind of employ that in my thinking, but it helps you, it prepares you, and it helps you to think on the spot because oftentimes you have to do that. Digital fluency. Everything's digital now. When I came out of school, there was no such thing, but now you need to be able to execute across systems, Word, PDFs. You need to understand PowerPoints. You need to understand access Excel spreadsheets. You have to be able to go over various modems, such as the classes that you find here at Blackboard. And your textbook is digital. I like that because when I was coming up, we had physical books. And man, I love the digital fluency aspect of it. Diversity. We are a school of people from all backgrounds, and that includes not just the students, but also the faculty and the administration. And then we prepare you to respect individuals from different backgrounds, from backgrounds that are different from yours, and to help you to understand in your own mind that even you don't have to agree. You know, like everybody's not LGBT, okay? But you still respect people. And people who are not LGBT people respect based on the race of an individual, the culture of an individual, the sex of an individual, the national origin of an individual, and the various dialects and languages of people you're going to come into contact with in your professional careers. You're going to be working in teams. The way that you work in teams in this class is quite honestly dealing with the discussion posts and responding to each other's discussion posts. That's how you do it. Remember, professional. Student once said that I grade my students like you're professionals. That's because I teach like you're professionals and teach you how to be a professional, because that's what you want to be. If you don't, I'm the wrong professor for you, because that's how I teach. Ethics. Lord knows we need ethical people. And we already talked about academic integrity in terms of citations and references in your papers and why that is. But ethics is so important. And I always say, if you're an unethical student, you'll be an unethical professional. Plagiarism is a form of unethical activity. Professional responsibility. Almost every employee field has a code of conduct. As a lawyer, we had a canon of ethics. If you're in law enforcement, if you are a prosecutor, if you are any position that you hold, probation, parole, corrections, you just name it, and it goes on. If you're in the scientific aspects, forensics, you have the same thing. Information literacy. Very important that you use credible sources. One of the sources that you will never use in my classes, and you shouldn't use in any, is Wikipedia. If you know anything about Wikipedia, you can go to Wikipedia. It is a word-based website, and anyone can change the information there. So you want information literacy. One of the best ways to make sure you have information literacy is utilize the sources in the library and learning center that we have that I've already shared with you. Diversity, equity, and inclusion goes right about what we talked about. This school is serious about that commitment. Again, we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion council at this school. I think now students are invited to participate. But we live in a world like this, and we should not only recognize diversity and equity is fairness, and inclusion, where a person's positions, even if they're different from yours, should also be considered. Okay? And these are the transferable skills that are in our programs throughout this school, and you're going to want to demonstrate them, and you're going to carry them on to your life when you leave this school. All right, attendance policy, I'll let you look at that yourself. The last thing I really talk about in detail is the late submission policy. And it's very important for you to understand this. You need to get this. So much so that I go right to what it says. It says you have 7 days after the deadline. And I told you the deadline is Sundays for written assignments, except discussion posts. Now, so week 1's assignments are due this Sunday. If it is submitted on Monday, you're going to lose 10%. Tuesday, you'll lose 20%. Wednesday, you'll lose 30%. Thursday, you'll lose 40%. 50%, you're failing now, even though you have 7 days to turn it in. So I have had students who turn in assignments 6 days late, and they say, okay, so I said, well, if your work is good, you're going to get 10% of whatever the points, and that's it. You don't want that to happen to you. Okay, now, regarding online discussions, let's get this straight, that at the end of the week, discussion posts are not to be accepted. Now, let me explain one caveat or one exception to that for me. Now, I don't know about every professor, but this is how I do it. So this week, your assignment discussion posts are due Saturday. All right. Now, if you submit assignment posts on Saturday or 8 assignment posts, and your reply post is not until that Sunday, and both of those posts are good, then what will happen is you'll lose 1 point for the 1-day lateness. Even though technically it ends on that Saturday, I extend it to that Sunday. If you post both of your posts on Sunday, it's off. you're not gonna get points. And that includes this week. Very important. You should be aware of that because that's a rule that the schools had all throughout your matriculation for your associates. And you have to be able to follow the instructions, and you have to be time conscious in terms of things. I cannot extend discussion assignment dates beyond the week. Now, this next statement applies to written assignments. Instructors may waive the late penalty or time frame in the case of extenuating circumstances. And it's determined not by your dean, not by your advisor, but by the faculty, which would be me. So that's why I'm open to communicate with you. Let me know what's going on. Usually if there's extenuating circumstances, it's good to try to reach out to me with a text or either a call, one or the other. It doesn't matter how late at night either. Remember I meant what it said, 25th hour. So that means you could do it anytime. So here's the key. Extenuating circumstances are determined on a case-by-case basis. And I have to know, if you turn in your assignments late, and I'm not aware of any extenuating circumstances, I'm not going to ask you if you had any. You're adults. I'm putting it on you to let me know. And let me know in a timely fashion. Don't come the week later and says, oh, last week, this is what happened to me is why my assignments were late. You're not going to get any consideration from me. I'm not going to do that. So communicate with me. Reach out to me. It's only fair. The rest of this in here, don't worry about it because it doesn't apply in this class. We don't have labs or exams. And then I don't give you additional work. And it says, the final thing, in no circumstances can you submit work after the last day of term unless you've applied for an incomplete and requested it and been granted beforehand. Once again, I'm the person that you have to reach for that. And I will determine whether I will grant it or not. And then here's the policy down here. You can go over that. The academic integrity policy, you can take time to read yourself. All right. So that's that. So remember where you can find it. You click here, and then you come over here, and you can find that. All right. Your library resources are there as well. All right. I think we got everything that I want to cover now. Let's get into the module and show you how each week it works. So one of the first things that I will generally do each week is after I go over the calendar, I will then go to the module. So it tells you what the topic is, Constitutional Foundations for Criminal Justice Procedures. I'm not going to spend time going over the teaching aspects of it, but I'm going to show you how this works. So let's do the written assignment. Okay, so you're going to look at this overview. Now, this is one of the few assignments that is not going to be submitted as a Word document. This is going to be submitted as a PowerPoint. It is a PowerPoint. Now, I want you to pay close attention to this. And if you're having problems, don't tell me, say, I'm having problems. Get those problems solved. Reach out to technical support if you have problems. But, and some students say, well, I have a certain computer, Chrome I use or something. I can't do it. Sorry. I'm not going to be able to help you. But here's what you're going to have to do. And I'm going to go over the rubric in just a minute. All right. So you're going to consider the paragraph. All right. Now, you're going to develop a 10 to 15 slide presentation. Did you hear me say a minimum of 10? With speaker notes. Speaker notes should be at the bottom, and I should be able to scroll down and access them. Students try to tell me I couldn't do that. Then you need to get some help with getting that done. Very important. And so you're going to differentiate between due process and substantive due process, which means you're going to do some research. Discuss the historical development of the Bill of Rights. Summarize the common rights associated with the Bill of Rights. Define judicial review, what that is, and provide some practical examples. Now, the slide requirement setup should have an introductory slide with the name, the date, the course name, and the title of your presentation. Closing slide with bullet points that summarize the main ideas. Each slide contains speaker notes. Each slide, and I'm not talking about the introductory slide, by the way, okay? But each slide, the meat of it, provide references at the end, a reference slide, and then credible sources in the body on the slides, citations. It says APA. I told you what APA is. Do not copy and paste material other than brief quotes from court cases, incidentally. And hear me good and hear me well. When you cite a case, the way that you cite a case is you put in, an example will be 345 U.S., because you'll be using Supreme Court cases, 345 U.S. 438. So you have a number, you have U.S., and then you have another number, and then in parentheses, you have the year that the case was issued. Now that's the way you have to put it at least once. So if it's Miranda versus Arizona, then you use a number, and I'm not giving you the exact citation, but 438 U.S. 485 parentheses 1966, and I just threw that out. Okay. Please, anytime during this course, it's going to say to you, cite cases, provide that information. If you need help, it's available through APA and Tutor Match. Tutors can help clarify instructions. Okay. Share tips for PowerPoints and help you through the issues. All right, very important, very important. All right, so we have resources to help you. So now let's look at the rubric. Now, you're going to see the rubric now, and this is how I grade. The rubric will be in the grade book also. I will put my comments at the bottom of the section of the rubric for the assignments. So you're going to have 4 columns. I don't operate from here. If you don't have citations or sources cited showing up in the body of the PowerPoint and written assignments that you'll have in weeks come, I'm going to consider it as incomplete or incorrect. Incomplete or incorrect. Incomplete or incorrect. No credible sources. You're going to end up over here, and you're going to end up with a 55. Okay, now that's assuming it's on time. But I don't want you to operate with this. As a matter of fact, I only show it to you because this is the column where you want to maximize your grades. So it tells you in the criteria section, the topic due process and substantive due process, outstanding differentiation between them. That means provide citations in the body. Okay, Bill of Rights, citations in the body. Judicial review, citations in the body. And then these are the requirements that I talked about, a minimum of 10 slides and explaining that with comprehensive speaker notes. Don't just give me a one little thing in there. No, your speaker notes should be like an addendum. When I was in school, we had to do what we call footnotes. And it's like those things, very important. All right. And then credible sources in APA format with reference page or reference slide, professional language, grammar, spelling, and punctuation. That's it. But people say, well, okay, I looked at, I got 55. What was my problem? Probably what you're going to see at the bottom of the section, for the first section, you're going to see no credible sources provided. And if none, you're not going to end up over here for anything. Everything's going to be over here. All right. So your total grade is probably going to be around 55, and that's failing. Now, wait a minute. Just missing citations? I said, yes, because it's income. I can't, if you look at the language in each category, that's one of the good things about the rubric is that it takes, it makes it more objective and not subjective. And I just strictly look to see if you can follow the rubric. And I read the material as well. I run it through Grammarly first. If it's a high Grammarly percentage, I'm not even get to the rubric because of the fact that you right there have messed up. And I already explained that earlier. All right. All right, so that's your written assignment, and it tells the due date as well. And you have unlimited times to do it before the due date. Now, if you do one and then you look at it, oh, you can either adjust that one or submit another one. You don't have to tell me, oh, I'm submitting a second time because. No, just submit it. I'll see them. And then I grade them all. And the one with the highest grade, it doesn't average out. The one with the highest grade becomes the final grade. All right. So then you have your discussion posts. And I already told you that this week, both of them are due Saturday. Now, if you look at your discussions, you will not see anything until you post your first post. We have what we call post first. And so once you post in there, you will be able to see that. You won't even see my responses to the posts as well. So here's what you're going to deal with. An overview. All constitutional law is subject to interpretation by the United States Supreme Court. Okay? And can be ruled unconstitutional and thereby illegal or void. And then the court can also instead remand it, what we call send it back to correct the law. And so dealing with things like Miranda warnings, you'll be able to explore judicial review. So provide what judicial review is all about. I'll talk about that just briefly today. All right. And then your reply post. Then your live classroom recording itself. Okay, let's go to this one first. This is where you click and you put the key phrase that goes in here, and you can put in there your key phrase that you'll have. You'll have that to go in by Saturday, by Sunday. If you do it on Monday, it's going to be 1 point taken away. If you do it on Tuesday, another point. So by the time you get to, before you get to 7 days, you can get a 0. All right. But you got to listen to the lecture. All right. So here's where you find the link right now to the lecture. This right here. Of course, if you click that, which I won't, it'll lead you right to where we are right now. But this will be taken out, and this will be converted to a YouTube video, and you'll be able to take that video and you'll be able to read it over. All right. You'll have a link sent to you by email as well as it being here. So most students don't end up even paying attention to this. So then what I usually do is I go over the topics, substantive and procedural due process this week. What does due process mean? Common steps, history of the Bill of Rights, summary of rights, judicial review cases, and then there's a knowledge check. All right, so I'm just going to touch on these because we're on good time today. So let's talk about a little bit about substantive and procedural due process. So it is quite clear that you have a right to privacy. There's a case called Griswold versus Connecticut. By the way, if you pay close attention, you see the citation. Remember, see there's a number, there's US, there's a second number, and then that's parentheses. That tells us the year that this case was decided. Okay, so anyway, this gives a scenario. Okay, you're going to answer these questions with what we're going to be talking about. So due process is important in our constitutional process. We have the Fifth Amendment, and the 14th Amendment applies the first 10 amendments called the Bill of Rights to the states. So the Fifth Amendment says that a person not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And then it also refers to you don't have to incriminate yourself, which is where the Miranda warnings came out of. But the Bill of Rights originally applied to the federal government. And then the 14th Amendment was added to apply the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, to the states. And it says, nor shall any state. If you read the original first 10 amendments, it's all regarding the federal government. But once the state gets involved with the 14th Amendment, it means that due process applies to the states as well as to the federal level. That's what it is. So there are two kinds of due process. There's what we call procedural due process and substantive. So let's talk about procedural first. In procedural due process, what it does is it gives you certain steps that you have and rules to make sure that there is fairness, so that when an individual is charged with an offense, that they have the right to prepare a proper defense. So you'll get, for example, a copy of the charges in writing. You'll also have the opportunity for reasonable bail. You'll also be able to provide, have an attorney represent you, as well as you'll have a right to a bench trial where the judge hears the case, or a jury trial where usually 12 people with 2 alternates hear the case. And the purpose is to make sure that before you adjudicate it to be guilty, you are presumed innocent. That's the way it works in our system. And you should not be deprived of life, liberty, or property until you've had a hearing. Or, as you will discover, that out of the cases that come before the court, roughly 90%, or a little over 90% of the cases are determined by what we call plea bargaining. and that's where a deal is worked out with the prosecution and the defense, and there is no trial, and the judge approves it. If the judge doesn't approve it, it doesn't go. All right. And so what we attempt to try to do in our system with procedural due process is to make sure that we give you all opportunities to exonerate yourself. And the goal is that we don't want innocent people to be convicted. However, you and I both know that that happens. But again, the system is there, but you have to have good lawyers that are involved. Not necessarily have to be wealthy. Public defenders are good lawyers as well. Look at what Supreme Court Justice Soto Mayer said, who is on the Supreme Court now. My job as a prosecutor is to do justice. And justice is served when guilty man is convicted and when an innocent person is not. That's the point. And that's what the goal is. All right. So now there's what we call civil and criminal procedural due process. We're going to talk about that. And so in the processes, the key thing is to make sure that, for example, in civil cases, this is where two individuals are suing each other, or it's not the state versus, but it's some individuals or companies versus. The way that it actually would start is that the suit is filed in the jurisdiction where the offense took place, and it involves a complaint which gives the what was being alleged as was wrong, and the defendant is given a summons also to that goes with that, and it is served proper notice so that you'll receive notice of it. And prior to going to trial, there may be attempts to settle disputes, which, by the way, happens quite frequently in civil cases. And then sometimes there's what we call mediation involved, where a mediator helps to settle this. So each party has a right to be heard. It says defendants have the right to try the civil case against them in front of a judge or jury, as you'll see too in the criminal case as well. Okay. Now, procedural due process in criminal cases is more extensive. Remember this, in civil cases, the standard for guilt is by a preponderance of the evidence. The standard for guilt in a criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, so in procedural due process and criminal cases is more extensive because the consequences include going to jail, probation or parole. Civil cases involve monetary damages usually, or injunctive relief. So at the time a person is arrested, and it goes all the way through to the rights that I had laid out a few minutes ago, all the way to appeal. And the key thing is to protect the rights of the individuals who are charged, and to ensure that there's a check and balance. So you have the police who represent the executive branch. You have the legislators who write the statutes and codes. And then you have the courts who interpret the cases. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a few minutes. Okay. And so it says, if law enforcement officers don't follow long-standing rules established by the law courts in a criminal case against a defendant, the case can be dismissed, or the evidence could be what we call quashed and not used. We'll get into that more in weeks to come. So here are some steps of procedural due process. So it starts out with the initial appearance, called an arraignment, and the procedural steps depend on your jurisdiction that you're operating in. says arraignment in some states is the same as initial appearance, but it is the final hearing before trial. So what that means is that there could be the arraignment, and then you go to trial. However, though, in between that time, there's what we call a discovery stage, where, or a disclosure stage, where the prosecution provides information to the defense about what the allegations are that they have and what information they have to substantiate the charges that were filed against a defendant. Okay. Substantive due process, we've talked about that already. Okay. But there's a lot of controversy involved about it. So, all right, so that's just a little. Notice, again, the court citations. There they are, right there. All right. Moving right along. We got about 20 more minutes. We've already talked about due process, but I'm just going to just show you something here, and then we're going to move on. You can look at this on your own. The meaning of due process. The Fifth Amendment, and we already talked about that, and the 14th, applying it to the states, and the substance and procedural. Okay, so you can take a look at that on your own. All right. Common steps. We've already talked about this, but I'll just show you again. You can go back and look at this. Initial court appearance, and if you click on that, it explains that usually that's within 48 to 72 hours of arrest. Okay, and then you have a right to an attorney. Preliminary hearing, 10 to 20 days after the initial court appearance. The preliminary hearing can be waived, or the prosecution can decide to go by way of what we call the grand jury. At the grand jury, there is no defense attorneys permitted. It's just the jury, the judge, and the defense prosecution. Then there are motions filed where you can determine whether or not information was legally obtained, violation of constitutional rights. The Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, is a big ticket. The Fifth Amendment is another big ticket as well. We'll talk about those coming up. You have a right to a bench trial where the judge hears, or the jury. All right. And then if you're found guilty, then you can appeal. You have the right to appeal all the way up to the highest court in the land, excuse me, which is the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court only accepts cases where there is a constitutional issue and has not been previously addressed adequately in previous cases. All right. Those are common steps. All right. So the Bill of Rights, which I'll very briefly go over, I already told you pretty much, were the first 10 amendments. So here's a summary of the Bill of Rights. Now, there's the, and then, you know, you're going to discover that the first, the second, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the eighth amendment are generally involved. In criminal cases, we don't have the First Amendment very much because it involves freedom of speech, but we could have that when we deal with disorderly conduct or marches or things of that nature. The Second Amendment is one of the most debated because it has to do with the right to bear arms, and that's when you run across that. The Fourth Amendment, I talked about that a few minutes ago. We're going to be talking about that quite a bit in this course, where is where the warrant clause, it says that it prohibits searches and seizures that are unreasonable, but the courts have carved out some what we call exceptions to reasonable search or the necessity to obtain a warrant. We'll talk about those in weeks to come. But the Fourth Amendment is going to be a topic that we're going to spend a lot of times. You cannot get a warrant except upon probable cause, and you go before a magistrate or judge to file a petition as well as an affidavit alleging facts that are sufficient for the judge or the magistrate to determine whether probable cause exists. Okay. We'll discuss this more in detail later. The Fifth Amendment generally is the due process clause, and everybody knows the Fifth. People take the Fifth. And what that means is the person cannot be forced to testify against themselves. And then you know about the infamous Miranda rights derived from the Miranda versus Arizona 1966 decision, which you'll see the citation at the bottom of this in a few minutes. Okay, so the amendment prohibits the government from trying a person who also has been acquitted twice for the same offense. And so that has to do with what we call double jeopardy. We'll talk about that a little bit. The Sixth Amendment is saying that you have a public trial and a speedy trial, which is determined on a state-by-state basis. Now, be aware of the fact that you have a right to an attorney, to cross-examine witnesses, and things like that. And the Miranda case says that while a person is in custody, that they have a right to an attorney. And we'll discuss this later on. But be aware of the fact that the leading case here is what's the name of it? I'm drawing a blank on it. Gideon versus Wainwright. Gideon versus Wainwright. And then we'll talk about that. The Eighth Amendment, excuse me, is the final amendment pretty much that you involve yourself with. And that involves cruel and unusual punishment and excessive bail and fines. And when you start talking about the death penalty, you're getting into the Eighth Amendment. When you start talking about bail, you're getting into the Eighth Amendment. When you start talking about whether or not a person has reasonable bail, you consider the goal of bail, where it says, and that's to ensure the defendant will appear at future court proceedings. And the Eighth Amendment will also be discussed more in detail. This is just introductory stuff. And then the First Amendment. So notice the cases. They didn't cite all of them. But okay, Arizona versus Gant, I don't see the Miranda, but you'll see that. Okay, there's the United States versus Robinson case. That's an exception case, but you'll see those later. But that was just showing you the amendments. Okay. Now, some of your rights, this again is a little exercise that you can do. And then the summary of the rights. And then you click on what we just talked about already. The First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Third Amendment. Okay, we didn't talk about that. Prohibits a soldier during wartime from being kept in private residence without the consent of the owner. The Fourth, we deal with that search and seizure. The Fifth, and it talks about that. They're just listing all of them. The Sixth, and that's speedy trials, right to an attorney. The Seventh, we don't pretty much spend time. This is deal with civil suits. The Eighth, we talked about excessive bails and punishment. The Ninth, we don't talk about, recognize that all rights not listed in the Constitution belong to the people. And then the 10th, recognize that any powers not delegated to the federal government by the Constitution nor prohibited by the state are reserved to the states. And then that's kind of like a summary of it. And then you close it. So that just shows you what the Bill of Rights are all about. So judicial review. Now, what is judicial review? That's one of the things that you have to do in terms of your assignments. There's a leading case called Marbury versus Madison. It's an 1803 case. And let's see if I can. 5 U.S. 137, 1803. Very important. Okay. Now, in this case, what happened is that it was established that it is the judicial branch, and this is United States Supreme Court, were to be the branch that says what the law is. A famous line that we're familiar with as lawyers and as political science majors is that with the 14th Amendment that I already told you, it applies to the state. And so the courts interpret the statutes and the cases. They follow a process called stare decisis. What that means is that cases that are decided before are considered in terms of future cases, and sometimes they're overturned. An example I'll give you that's not a criminal case is Plessy versus Ferguson, that said that segregation was the law of the land. But in 1954, in the famous Brown versus the Board of Education case, the United States Supreme Court reversed and overruled Plessy versus Ferguson and said that is not the law of the land anymore. Separate but equal is not the law of the land, and that there should not be any segregation. But you and I both know that it still is. And so the courts decide that they're not writing the law, but what they're doing is interpreting the cases. Now, we have the same thing happening today in the civil aspects, if you've been listening very carefully to the United States Supreme Court, priming themselves to overrule Roe v. Wade, the abortion case. And so we're going to see where that goes. But you've heard, I'm sure, each of you in the news that that's the direction that they're headed in. All right. So we're not going to go over these. But be aware that the key thing is that judicial review is sometimes referred to as judge-made law or bench law. But judicial review is also something that sometimes it's criticized because sometimes people feel like the judicial branch is crossed over into legislative branch, but there's some debates about that. Okay. So judicial review is what we call a necessary check and balance power, where the judiciary checks the executive branch, which represents law enforcement, the mayors, the governors, the president, and then they interpret the regulations, laws, or the acts that are passed by Congress, the House and the Senate, and then signed by the president, which become law. And so the court is oftentimes asked to check those to see if they violate the Constitution. And if they do, then they come back and overrule things. Such example here is one here, Loving versus Virginia, a 1967 case, which talks about equal protection or due process rights. And so what the court did in Loving versus Virginia, which they made a movie out of, where a integrated couple got married in Virginia and they were arrested and charged with violating the law. Well, it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, where they came back with I think it was a unanimous decision that said you can't dictate who a person is married to. And so as a result of that, Loving versus Virginia, integrated marriages became the law of the land, and no state can pass a law prohibiting those. Okay. And so that's some examples. So a little history of judicial review. You can take a look at that yourself. Okay. And then these are some of the cases that go with judicial review. And this again is a tool that you guys can study. And these are 5 cases that have that overturned unconstitutional laws. Harper versus the board. Loving versus Virginia, I told you about that. Virginia law that prohibited interracial marriages and legitimatized and legalized interracial marriages. Roe v. Wade, you know about that one. I just talked about that. Abortions are constitutional, but now there's some attack on that as well. And then our last one I'll do, overturn this law. This case, 215, overturned laws prohibiting same-sex marriage, which legalized same-sex marriages. Okay, so it kind of did the same thing that Loving did. All right. So you can take a look at these 5 cases. Okay. And then finally, this is something that you can go over to yourself as we get near the finish line here. Everything that we've kind of talked about today. Which amendment originally applied due process to the federal government? How about this one? The 5th Amendment. Okay. Remember, the 14th applies it to the state. A civilian is challenging a law that they believe is a violation of the Constitution. This is an example of what? Federal due process, procedural due process, procedural justice. We didn't talk about those. So it's one of these. I think it's this one. Let's see. That's wrong. It was actually substantive. And I'll tell you why. The correct answer is substantive. Procedural due process focuses on the procedures. Remember, we talked about that to determine guilt. Procedural justice is just another phrase for procedural due process. And federal due process is a general phrase that to describe the process. So it's not that. One last one. Which amendment prohibits the government from trying an acquitted person twice? Is it the 2nd Amendment? That's the right to bear arms. Is it the 4th Amendment? That's search and seizure. Is it the 6th Amendment, the speedy trial and right to counsel, or is it the 5th Amendment? See, it's not that one. So it is this one. The right to bear arms is the 2nd. The 5th is the procedural due process clause. That's why you have that in there. So you have to make sure you look at these so you can see. All right, that's it. So you can go through the rest of these and check them out for yourself. Okay, so that's it for today. I'm going to give you a phrase that I want you to understand and know about, and that's judicial review. Judicial review. Give me that and you get your points. All right. I hope to see you all next Monday, 7:00 p.m. when we start into week 2. If you have any questions, again, you have to listen to this video because it gives you a lot of information to help you. In the meantime, I'm going to say have a good evening and take care of yourself. Good night.